Let's talk for a while about the functional organization of the grammar. So if we move in through the clause in its environment in the text, so in other words, we move in on the grammar from above, we can begin to detect patterns of meaning organized according to different functions. These functions are known as metafunctions, and they reveal the different contributions that the clause makes to the construction of meaning as text unfolds. One is a textual metafunction, and this is a clause as a message, as a quantum of information in the flow of information that unfolds with the text in its context. Another is the interpersonal metafunction, and this is the clause as a move, an ongoing exchange between speaker and addressee. A move where the speaker initiates or responds. And thirdly, there is the experiential metafunction, and this is now the clause as construing experience, construal of experience of the flow of events. More specifically here, the clause is a quantum of change in our experience of the flow of events. So these are the three strands in the clause: the textual, clause's message; the interpersonal, clause's move; and experiential, the clause is a configuration organizing a quantum of change in the flow of events. Here is an example of the kind of metafunctional analysis of the clause as message, move, and figure that will meet in this course. The yellow strand, that's the textual analysis, the clause organized as a message into theme and rime, and that's where we'll start after this introduction. When we look at the clause as it contributes to the unfolding of the text, to the construction of meaning in text as different patterns of wording in the clause, we see then that meaning is not just one kind. It is in fact three different kinds of meaning. And we could say that meaning, if we think of it as white light, in fact, when we hold up a prism to this white light, when we hold up an understanding of the functional organization of grammar, the theory of metafunctions, that there is in fact a spectrum of meaning. And we could assign different colors to these. So we can say textual meaning, that's like yellow color, that's a sort of highlighting color. Interpersonal meaning, that's red. That's the color of interaction, paying attention, toing and froing. And experiential meaning, that can be represented by blue, the color of the environment, the blue sky, and the blue of the ocean, say. So we can say that the metafunctions represent a spectrum of different patterns in the construction of meaning in the clause, and also other units. This figure represents metafunctional analysis of text as analogous to holding up a prism to white light. Just as a prism will disperse white light into different kinds of light, different bandwidths, so the metafunctional analysis will effect the dispersion of meaning into interpersonal meaning, textual meaning, logical meaning, and experiential meaning. But let's look at a little animation of dispersion of light by a prism, something we can return to when we talk about the construction of meaning in text.
Dispersion of white light. What happens when a beam of white light strikes a prism? When a narrow beam of ordinary white light is passed through a glass prism, different wavelengths travel through the glass at different frequencies and appear as a continuous broad band of different colors, called the spectrum. This phenomenon, by which a ray of light splits into its constituent colors when it is passed through a transparent medium, is known as dispersion.
So when you think about the clause and the different strands of meaning, it may be helpful also to look across at different meaning-making systems, like painting. So if you look at this painting, probably a landscape in the Mediterranean, Italy or Spain, you think about what are the different kinds of meaning being represented in this painting. So maybe most obviously there is the representational meaning, the experience, a woman walking down a road, mountains, vegetation and so on. But also think about it interpersonally, say the fact that the woman is not gazing at us, there is no engagement, no interaction, but a very warm color scheme. And think about it textually, say for example the composition, the use of light and so on. This is one way of exploring different kinds of meaning, as you would also find them in the clause. So for example, in terms of the representation of experience, clearly the woman walking down the road is an important aspect of the experience represented by the painting. But if you think about it textually, if you think about how our attention is guided, then it's also constructed compositionally in terms of the colors, the tones, the brightness, so that the woman stands out as being particularly prominent or salient. So the flow of meaning in language, in text, turns out to be a spectrum of different kinds of meaning. Just as a beam of white light turns out to be a spectrum of different bandwidths or colors. And we see this when we hold up a prism to white light. Similarly, we understand that meaning is a spectrum of different kinds of meaning when we hold up a functional theory to the flow of meaning. So we were talking about the spectrum of meaning, and we're using the different colors, red, yellow, green, and blue, to represent different kinds of meaning. We call these different modes of meaning, different metafunctional modes of meaning, because each mode of meaning corresponds to one particular function, one particular metafunction of language. So red represents interpersonal meaning. That's meaning as action, or rather interaction, when we use language to get things done. Using the interpersonal resources, we enact our roles and relations with others in dialogue, initiating an exchange or responding to an exchange that's been initiated. Yellow represents textual meaning, and that's sort of the color of highlighting, of pointing the light to something, making it more prominent, picking it out for our listeners, our readers, to pay attention to different ways. So that's sort of telling them, I'm guiding you in your interpretation of the flow of meaning. I'm telling you, I'm indicating to you, this is the point of departure, this is a focus of new information, and so on. Green represents logical meaning. In the first instance, logical semantic relations of cause, condition, concession, different temporal relations, restatement, illustration, exemplification, addition, alternation, contrast, and so on. And finally, blue represents experiential meaning. So this is the meaning having to do with how we construct for ourselves our experience of the environment, of the world around us and inside us. Okay? And you can think of blue as the color of the environment on a good day, the blue sky, the blue ocean. And logical, of course, also of the environment, the green of life, vegetation. Logical and experiential, in fact, function together to construe experience according to different models. And we'll come to what these models are. So the spectrum of meaning then covers interpersonal, textual, logical, and experiential. And when we discuss these throughout the semester, we will take them in the following sequence. We will start with textual, the highlighting color, the yellow highlighting color, because we'll find that what gets made prominent through the textual resources, these elements that are made prominent are themselves experiential, logical, or interpersonal. So the textual reveals something about these other contributions to meaning, and itself too reveals something about itself as well. Then we move on to interpersonal meaning. So meaning as action, or rather interaction, where the clause is a move in the ongoing dialogue. In textual meaning, clause is a message, sort of quantum of information in the flow of information. But interpersonally, the clause is a move in the construction of dialogue. Then, staying with the clause, we'll move to experiential. So this is a clause as a representation of our experience, more specifically, a quantum of experience in the flow of events. And here then the experience is modeled as a process, participants involved in the process, and attendant circumstances. So these three, I mean, we could say this is clause as a figure or configuration. These three, textual, interpersonal, experiential, are three strands that run through the clause, and also other units in the grammar. And then finally we'll turn to logical. Now logical in English operates less within the clause and more between clauses. So logical is concerned with how we construct chains of clauses to represent sequences of events, chains or series of clauses, linking one clause to another in terms of cause, condition, temporal sequence, and the other logical semantic relations, some of which I mentioned earlier. So that's our journey through the grammar. We focus on the clause, but we use the meta functions as a guiding principle to gradually unravel the different strands of meaning that are constructed as wordings in the clause.